Okay, I'm sorry. I know that was really long, but I feel like the creation is such a pivotal part of our doctrine that it's worth taking a little more time on. So sorry, I promise to be faster next week. Good news is on the object lesson side, we can go through these pretty fast. So for your supplies list for this week, you really don't need much. The first one, we're going to learn a song. It's an obnoxious song that will help your kids learn the stories of the Old Testament in order, kind of like Book of Mormon stories does for us, but in a more obnoxious kind of way. So this one you just need paper for the printable. If you want your kids to color rather than print the full color version, then you want to grab some coloring tools. The second one, all you need are Post-it notes. Even slips of paper that you tape down would be fine. This is just, we're going to do a demonstration that's almost like playing Twister, but you need a few Post-it notes that you can write on or slips of paper that you can tape in place. The third one we're going to talk about is the actual creation days or periods. I thought it would help my kids to understand kind of big concept about what happens on each day if they actually crafted something to make it. But I have a bigger goal in mind. So the printable this week for your kids and teenagers is this cool pyramid that actually walks through the creation days. There's one that is full color like this, and then there's one that they can color themselves. It starts in this, and then you form them together to make this pyramid shape. So you really just need paper for this one, and then coloring supplies. But I also created, while we were in COVID and couldn't go to the temple, I had a feeling I was losing a little bit of, I couldn't remember things as clearly as I wanted. So back in 2020, I made this print that goes on my office wall. You might have seen it in some of the shots before, but it actually is the creation stages so that I can glance up at them. It's all the different creative periods. And I put it on my wall so that I can remember what happens in the temple even when I can't be there. And that's my goal with this as well. If you haven't noticed on the chart this year, I added a temple icon. This is kind of like a junior version of temple prep. My hope is that as we continue to introduce temple concepts and temple words and visuals that are all approved by the church to share, that our kids will become more familiar with what happens at the temple. And since the creation story is so interwoven into the endowment ceremony, we're going to take some time this week to teach both. So for the supplies list, if you want to make the print, this is a 16 by 20 that I printed at Walgreens and then put in a floating frame, but I give you both versions in case you want to just print it and put it in a normal frame. And then supplies for this, you just need cardstock and coloring tools. Okay, that's it for your supplies list. Let's get into each object lesson to show you how to teach it. You probably can't even call this first thing an object lesson. It's really just a song to help you teach. So just like last week when we focused on the books of the Old Testament so that your kids kind of know the books in order, hopefully you had a chance to play the mind and figure that out. This week I wanted to focus more on the stories, because what's tricky about the Old Testament is lots of those books have names that your kids will never pronounce, and they don't sound like familiar prophets. It's not like the Book of Mormon where we can hear the title of a book and we sort of remember at least something about that particular prophet. In the Old Testament, that's a little different. So I thought if we had a way to kind of walk through the stories, then my kids would at least be able to get their bearings a little bit better. I should say that this original idea I did not invent. So I wrote a song that goes to the tune of the Hokey Pokey, and I'm really sorry for that. But the original concept for it came from my seminary class when I was a senior in high school. I can still remember the first day we were in the Old Testament and the teacher taught us Jacob's dad was Isaac and his dad was Abraham. And that's the piece I can still remember. I can't tell you, even when I was teaching gospel doctrine, I used that little memory, the memory of singing that one phrase to help me keep things in order. So I thought if it can last for me that long, it can for sure last for my kids that long. So I created many more verses. The first one I think I learned in seminary, but again, I might have tweaked the words. If you don't know this about me, I'm a big fan of girls' camp songs. There's several things on my website that are devoted to teaching people girls' camp songs, because I really have no musical talent of my own, but I'm really good at song leading, especially when it doesn't demand a real melody. So that's the idea behind this object lesson. So I give you in the printable, the song, I will have Violet sing it for you. It's a very simple, ridiculous way to learn the stories of the Old Testament. And they are broken down in visuals. If you haven't seen the new visuals that the church put together for the scripture stories, specifically for 2022, they put together new visuals for the Old Testament, and they're so good, you guys. I think not just for kids, but I feel like for teenagers and adults to be able to like flip through the Old Testament stories and be like, oh, okay, now I remember who Elijah is. Oh, now I remember who Ruth is, because it's a lot, right? And we haven't studied it in a while. So I would totally recommend you go and look at those. That's where these images came from. But it's just going to kind of walk you through the first chunk of the Old Testament. I wrote 6 verses. So this is your first. The theory is that by the time you get to the end of this year, I will have taught you all 6 verses, and you'll have this great big long zigzag chain that your kids can sing through. It's also a good memorization tool, so that as your kids are trying to learn these in order, you can hide 1 or 2. Like I can hide a few and see if my kids can remember the middle. I can, adjust it and change it. Again, if you don't have enough ink or looks hard to print, there is a just blank version that only has the text that your kids can look at the scripture and then fill it in with what they think the Tower of Babel looks like. But that's the idea behind this simple printable. It will come in 2 pieces, and you're actually just going to glue the 2 together to form your zigzag, and then over the course of time, you'll have a super thick, kind of like the Bible, you'll have a super thick picture book to walk you through most of the common stories of the Old Testament.
Here we go. First the world began, then God created man. Noah built the ark, the tower was a stupid plan. Jacob's dad was Isaac and his dad was Abraham. Joseph in Egypt land. Woo!
If you've ever played the game of Twister, then you're all equipped for object lesson 2. The idea of this is, now in Twister, when you're trying to keep 1 foot planted somewhere and you try to reach to a different colored dot, you get a little bit off balance, and the further you have to stretch, the harder it is to stay balanced. That's kind of how I see what our kids experience with learning the gospel and learning in the world. That sometimes what the world teaches lines up just great with what the gospel teaches. Like the human bodies are amazing, right? That's something science teaches and that God teaches. But sometimes what the world teaches and what God teaches are vastly different, and it creates imbalance. So that's kind of what this object lesson is designed to help your kids. It's walking through that process of how do I know what could be true and what definitively isn't. So you're going to make a series of Post-it notes. The first one, you just want to either have a Post-it note or tape it to the ground, because they can be kind of slippery to step on otherwise. But the first one will be the plan of salvation. That's what the prophets teach is our anchor, right? Understanding Jesus Christ, especially his role in the plan of salvation, and who I am, who God is, that I was created in his image, what my purpose here on earth is all about, where I came from. That plan of salvation is our anchor. It teaches us a lot about why we're here. That is our anchor, and everything else we learn in this world is outside of it. So one of my favorite teachers, Michael Wilcox, teaches this with a compass, and he talks about the different legs. He says there's a compass that you use to draw a circle. He says that there's a steady leg and there's a wandering leg, that you can use to capture a lot of different ideas. That's the same concept, but you're going to do it with legs. So you're going to have your kids put their right foot on the plan of salvation, and then you're going to place in their perimeter things that are potentially true, like the ideas, theories that are out there about the creation. So for example, some of the ones I wrote down is that mankind is amazing, human body is amazing. I would put that one kind of close to that plan of salvation Post-it note. A little further out, I would put that humans have lived a long, long time. We don't know how long the creation periods lasted, so it's possible that what the earth or what the world teaches about the length of time that the earth has been here could be true, right? We don't know exactly how that works out. So I'd put that one a little further out. That next level out, I would put another one like the creation happened because of a supernova, right? That's a bigger leap. I have to stretch in order to get my right foot on the plan of salvation and my left foot on that supernova Post-it note. It's possible to believe in both. It's possible God used tools like a supernova to create the world. We don't really know, but it's a stretch. And what your kids will find as they try to get a right foot on the plan of salvation and a left foot further out is that they need stability. So with Violet, when she did this, she immediately grabbed a chair and then she said, "Mom, hold my waist," so that she could lean really far to try and reach and not get off balance, because she was trying to keep that right foot on the plan of salvation. That's kind of what we want to talk to our kids about with seminary, institute, primary, even the Come Follow Me curriculum that we talk about every single day as a family. The goal here is that you will be solidly planted on that right foot, so that as you explore the world and learn lots of different theories, you could stay believing, but enjoy all these different ideas. That's one of my favorite things I did this week is when I was studying the creation, I started studying, well, what's the latest that science has published on this? What do we think? So that's a good thing. We want our kids to do that. But it's important to understand that last level, that there are some things that are outside of the perimeter. So on mine, I wrote on the last one, man descended from another species. We know from prophets, and we know from the scriptures that teach that we were created in God's image, that that theory of men can't be true. So this post-it I place deliberately very far. And I say, okay, Violet, try and get your right foot on the plan of salvation and your left foot all the way out to that post-it way out there. And no matter how much stability or strength she gets from outside sources, she can't reach it. And there's something really powerful about that teaching, that the only way for me to jump to that post-it is to take my foot off the plan of salvation. And that's what we're trying to teach our kids to avoid. That when you explore the world and when you learn from all the cool things around you, you have to stay solidly planted, because that's where truth is. And we believe from prophets that truth and science will eventually blend perfectly. We just have limited science that's constantly evolving and limited revelation that will eventually be fulfilled. We'll know all of it. And that in time, that will come together. But that our job in the meantime is to explore and learn, but stay solidly planted. So hopefully the post-it notes help you teach it. Understanding what God created on which day is not so much about memorizing all the details as much as it is seeing the process, understanding, like the Come Follow Me manual teaches in that very first paragraph, that God can take chaos and disorder and create something and organize something that is beautiful and magnificent. And that's why we study the creation story. So I wanted to help my kids find a way to do this simply and kind of cool. So I decided to make a pyramid. So the idea behind this is that you'll create something that looks like this by the end. And on it you have the Grand Council, which I consider like day 0, and then each day and what you created. Honestly, I feel like, especially if you have teenagers, this is probably better if you print the blank version, because then it forces them to use the scriptures that are on the printable and then to find out what God created that day. The idea being that as I read what happened on day 1, then I can draw the light and the dark being divided. As I read about the council in heaven, I can draw what I think that looks like. So even for little kids who want to be able to imagine creating and what they would create, and teenagers who are just trying to capture why and what he created, the draw it yourself version might be better. But if you're in a hurry, try this one. Again, it features that same artwork from the church website that I just wanted to draw attention to because I think they did such a great job on it. But you'll create that together. Ideally, while you're creating these days and understanding what he created on which day, you'll also talk about the temple. Now, this one you're going to have to gauge. It might not be something you teach all at once to your kids. Maybe you teach your teenagers and your littler kids differently. If you're teaching a seminary class versus a primary class, you might handle this differently. But one of the things I loved about the church website, especially the temple website, is that they lay out really clearly what happens in the endowment ceremony. The things that are commanded to be sacred are not shared, but there's so much that is shared. So I give you some links in the notes to visuals, pictures you can show about various endowment rooms that show that it looks like a Garden of Eden, right? You can talk about the creation story and talk about the endowment. Talk about why this saving ordinance is so critical. It's spelled out for you on the church website. And I just kind of thought it would be powerful as my kids understand the creation story in the Bible to help them look forward to the day when they're going to see it in a different way. They'll learn even more by learning about the creation in the temple. And then hopefully you'll be able to kind of teach them some phrases that they should expect. Obviously nothing sacred, but if you use that church website as a template, it gives you great understanding of like, what are the covenants that you make? What are the promises you make to God? What are the blessings you can expect? All that's laid out for you on the church website. And I think it's really good to teach it. I think especially using this gateway of the creation as a way to teach your kids about the temple so that when they eventually get there, it's familiar. They'll know the creation story, they'll recognize where they are, and they'll feel more at home in the temple. And that's what we're all hoping for. So hopefully this helps you teach it. Again, if you want to get the print of the days of creation that I have on my wall. Sorry, I have to shift down. If you want to put this on your wall, for me, there was something cool about, I have 10 pictures of temples, the outside of a temple on my wall, but I really liked the reminder of what I learned on the inside. In a reverent, deliberate way, this print reminds me about what I learn inside. And having that on my wall has made an incredible difference, especially during those times when I can't get to the temple as often as I wish I could. So hopefully it helps you. You can find this one in this week's creative, the attachment area, but also in the introduction area, just in case you need to track it down. All right, you guys, that's it for that week. That's it for this object lesson. Week 2, it's all wrapped up. Okay, I hope you have some good tools to work with. For sure you have good scripture to study. So again, if you didn't hear it before, print out the harmony of the creation stories. It will help you in your study immensely. And then enjoy the object lessons as much or as little as works for your family or your class. But again, if you want to join me on Instagram, you can find me there. We're doing it Mondays this year. So Mondays at 2 o'clock Mountain Time, we'll walk through some of the insights that I love or couldn't quite get here, and then give you some understandings about the creative as well. So hopefully it will help you. If you need something in the meantime, you can always jump on the discussion boards, leave questions, comments, photos that are my favorite, whatever you happen to need to chat about in the community, use the discussion boards. You can find those at the top right. In every single video, there's a little chat icon, and that's where you can find it. But otherwise, enjoy studying the creation this week, and I will see you guys on Monday.